Yes. And I will just make note that we are recording the meeting.
Perfect. Okay, so for the recorded record, my name is Attorney Jeff Turco. I represent the Sons of Divine Providence. With me tonight is Father Antonio, who's the provincial of the Sons of Divine Providence, as well as when I'm done with my presentation and when you so indicate, we'll have members of the public in the neighborhood who support the project to come on the camera and voice their support. This project in essence would replace, for those of you from the neighborhood know, there are two existing billboards on the bottom of the hill on McClellan Highway that serve the purpose of advertising for the shrine. This proposal would be to remove those two existing billboards and replace it with a new electronic billboard. The electronic billboard would serve multiple purposes. One is it would serve the needs of the church on the hill, but frankly, more importantly, in these economic times, it would be a source of revenue for the shrine. As everyone on this Zoom knows, the last few years with COVID has done a number on all kinds of nonprofits, including religious nonprofits. But even before that, as the population shifts in the area, the financial cost of running the shrine have gone up. And so the fathers have gone out and looked to say, how can we better maximize what we have in terms of resources to create revenue streams that will help sustain the shrine. One of the things that I think is important to point out here about the shrine is, there's a lot of talk, today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would suggest that this shrine, sort of embodies all of that. Anybody that comes up here will see the shift from a predominantly Italian-American shrine to there's a vibrant Portuguese community up here now. There's a vibrant Spanish community up here, on top of course, what's left of the Italian-American community in the area. And the shrine serves all those different communities here. In terms of the billboard itself and the proposal, and I want to be clear, we're not looking for a vote tonight. We're looking to put this before you and have a discussion and get feedback. What this billboard would do is it would be approximately a maximum height of 60 feet, which from grade of McClellan Highway. So the sign would be lower than the top of the hill. So nobody that lives on the hill would actually see the sign or see the lights from the sign from their residence. The sign will be lower than the top of the hill, and it's going to be comprised of specific type of lighting that deflects the light downward to the viewing public. And not upwards. So again, there'll be no radiant light coming up off the sign that would reflect off it won't take away from the cross, which is already on the top of the hill and is lit, because that's not what we're intending to do. And it certainly will not disturb our friends and neighbors here on the hill. The proposal would include over $150,000 of cost involving landscaping and maintaining the area. Which I think would be a vast improvement for the people that drive by and people that actually use the area near the cross to go up there and have some peaceful, quiet time overlooking the city, but also have some time for reflection. At the community meeting, there were over 200 letters of support from East Boston residents were received and were presented. And we think that this is a win-win for everybody in the area, because again, it creates a revenue stream that doesn't rely on the church and the community going to seek public assistance. It allows us to go and maximize land that's the fathers are committed to preserving as a non-developable site, while also getting their important message across. So we're happy to answer any questions. And again, Father Antonio's here, and then members of the public are here if you're ready to hear them at your convenience. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think you addressed this. There is a note in the chat that said, I hope the proposed sign will not obscure the cross for motorists driving north or southbound.
Correct. Yes. I mean, that's so the proposed billboard would be a maximum height of 60 feet. We're waiting for the engineers to come back with a specific height that it would be. But as I understand the way the sign will be done, it'll be sort of a pie shape going out, so it will not, the height will not interfere with the cross, and that's certainly not what with my clients. It's very important to my clients that not happen.
Great. Gail, I see you have a hand raised.
Yes, I have a number of questions. I'll give time, obviously, to others to ask, but there are many questions. First of all, this is zoned as a conservation sub-district, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yes, and so we currently have billboards forbidden, and they're not allowed in this neighborhood, even though one has gotten permitted kind of through a flawed process on Boardman and McClellan a couple of years back. And this is a private entity, right? For applying for this billboard, are they not?
It's the Sons of Divine Providence have contracted with an entity that would actually put up the exorbitant amount of money to actually put the billboard up. So these are not inexpensive, and it's certainly beyond the financial reach of the fathers to pay for that. So yes, it's a partnership.
So a partnership, but it's so the Divine Providence is applying for the permit?
It'll be Sons of Divine Providence and Maverick Media will actually be the official applicants before the ZBA.
And who will be taking in the proceeds?
I mean, I think that's a business relationship between the Sons of Divine Providence and Maverick Media as to how that money gets split. But obviously the Sons of Divine Providence wouldn't enter into an agreement like this if it wasn't financially advantageous for them.
I know, I'm trying to draw a distinction, however, though, is it they're going to realize some revenues, or they're going to realize all the revenues and pay a percentage to a private company? So
there will be lease rights, which will generate income from the lease to the Sons of Divine Providence. That's how they'll generate that's how they'll get the benefit of the bargain.
All right, so it's not the Divine Providence order that's applying. It is the private company.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we're the property owner, so we're going to be on the application. But ultimately, the private company will go out there. I assure you, Father Antonio is busy enough. He doesn't have time to go out and sell advertising for billboards. So that's why we contract with this private company and have them. They'll go out and they'll find the advertisement within the strictures of a written lease agreement with the Sons of Divine Providence in terms of what messages can be put on that board, because it is still church property, and so we want to make sure that the messages that are put out there are consistent, consistent with the mission and teachings of the church.
And how often is signage going to be showcasing the Madonna, for instance?
Well, they have a certain amount of time per month that they're given as part of the lease, that that the activities at the shrine and the Madonna will be advertised. I don't have a specific, each hour, how many minutes it'll be, but what I can assure you is a condition of agreeing to get rid of 2 dilapidated billboards that do, even though they're dilapidated, they serve the purposes of advertising the shrine. It'll be replaced with a much nicer appearance for the public, on the billboard, and it'll be sufficient to make sure that people know that the shrine is here, and that the shrine wants you to come up here.
But technically, if you're driving by, this is going to be a digital glaring, colorful sign, right? Much like the one at Boardman and McClellan, correct?
It'll certainly be a digital sign. I wouldn't say glaring sign, because I think the lighting technology is such that it's meant to be pleasing to the eye, not to distract from the driving public. And there'll be a consistent spin of ads that are put on there, but not so fast as to cause the driving public to be distracted.
And just to jump off something in the chat, many people are asking if we can see renderings of the sign. Is that possible?
Yes.
And then Mike, I see you have a question after that.
Yeah, I just want to add, the renderings sometimes don't accurately depict how and where it's going to be. And so you have a full scale understanding of how that really is going to be situated on the hill. And besides, please keep in mind, this is a forbidden use now, so.
And thank you for holding that up, Jeffrey. Maybe if we could get a digital copy, that's something we can, distribute.
Absolutely.
It might be difficult to see now. You can send it to the Orient Heights Neighborhood Council email and we can get that out to folks.
We'll get that out to you tonight.
Mike, I see you have a hand raised.
Taking myself off mute. Good evening, everyone. So a couple of questions. Mr. Turco, you said 60 feet tall. I would assume that you mean that it would be on a column or a post that is roughly that height, but that the full height of the actual display space would be approximately the same scale as a typical billboard. Is that correct?
I am told that the maximum height of the top of the sign will be 60 feet.
Right,
So
but I'm
it'll be-
talking about
it
the
will-
live
it will be-
display area of the signage will not be the full 60 feet of height, correct?
Correct, right. There'll be a pole that holds similar to what you see
Correct.
right down the
So
street.
roughly 12 feet tall, the display board area would be that height. In regard to the content to be displayed, would this be static photographic content or moving video content?
It's digital and it's static.
It's digital and it's static.
Yeah, so digital meaning obviously there's digital photos, sort of like if you
Understood.
had okay.
Very clear about how the technology works.
I'm not so clear,
Okay.
Mr. Russo. That's why I was clarifying.
Some of these billboards are capable of displaying video imagery. Given the proximity to a heavily trafficked and, might I say, dangerous intersection, I think that displaying video would be extraordinarily distracting to motorists.
You don't have
And,
to worry about that. It won't happen.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So again, it's a consideration, and because it wasn't clearly stated in your explanation of it, I just wanted to clarify those 2 points.
No, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate that.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Couple questions in the chat that I'll read off. Will the fathers get a say as to what will be advertised on the billboard, for example, cannabis companies?
Yes. So we put in the lease, again, without getting too far afield in terms of what's in the lease, but there is very clear language in the lease that messages that are advertised on the billboards need to be consistent with the teachings of the church.
Okay. And another question, it shows one screen in the rendering, but isn't it true that there will be 2 screens? Will it be 1 or 2 screens?
It's going to be 1 on each side. It's going to be back to back. That's just the way the photo, when we send you the electronic versions of this tonight, we'll make sure we include so you see, but it'll be 2 screens, 1 in each side.
Will that also show the billboards that'll be replaced in what you'll send us?
They'll be gone, but we can send you the actual photos.
Okay.
They're not in the renderings because they're not in the renderings because they're gone, but we can show you the actual photos of what they look like.
Okay, that would be very helpful. We have a lot of requests for that in the chat.
That may be in the morning if that's okay, if we don't have those photos with us tonight, but.
Yep, we'll, just so everyone knows, Jessica and I will be sending out the minutes, the recording and what you all send over, probably within 1 to 2 business days.
Okay, thank you.
And then I see we have a hand from Marguerite.
Yes, hi, my name is Marguerite, and Attorney Turco, I have a very interesting thing to say to you regarding the sign. My name is Marguerite, and I'm a resident of Orient Heights for 35 years plus. I was born and brought up on Gladstone Street, and I absolutely support this proposal. First and foremost, it will benefit the Don Orione Shrine, a landmark place of worship for the thousands of residences and as well as the tourists that drive by. Breeds Hill has been an unkept eyesore of debris and 7 to 10 foot weeds for decades, creating a negative effect to anyone driving by that might be contemplating buying land or property in the Orient Heights area. This proposal will include regular landscaping, the upkeep of regular landscaping, and to anyone considering living in the Orient Heights area, it will be nothing but a plus. As an owner of this property on 102 Barnes Ave, I am very, very excited about someone jumping in and improving the drive-by situation that we have that has such a negative impact on the residents and on the tourists of John Orione Shrine. This
Thank
new
you very
bill,
much.
this new bill sounds, explicitly as a resident and a property owner, it sounds like people that live on the hill are not going to be impacted by the 60-foot billboard. They should be so grateful that all of that debris and all of the weeds, and I've tried to walk up there, Attorney Turco, and I've actually seen all of those weeds have been broken by not just a possum or a small rodent, but possibly the coyotes coming from Suffolk Downs, which live in the Suffolk Downs inlet back there. I work for Suffolk Downs, and I know what's going on. And the coyotes are coming up the hill in the middle of the night, and they're festering in that debris. And I'm very upset about it because there's kids living on that hill and teenagers that walk that hill, and it's a hazard. So I'm very excited that the landscaping will be upkept. And I thank you for, proposing this. And I'm totally, don't forget, Breeds Hill is a landmark in history. The
Thank
Battle
you
of
so
Bunker Hill.
much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Marguerite.
Thank
I
you
just
for
want to,
listening.
yes, I want to make sure we get everyone's questions in. And so I see Sean has a hand. Gail, I'm not sure if it's another question, but if it is, we can take you after Sean. And then I'd really want to make sure that everyone on the agenda has time. We do have a few updates from a few other folks. So if we go to Sean and Gail, then we'll move on.
Okay, awesome.
You need or
thanks.
anything? Thank you.
You mind if I share my screen real quick and show a couple pictures?
Sure.
Awesome. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Sean.
Awesome. So this is just going to show everybody one of the signs they look to propose that currently exists on 1A. So real quick, Sean Calista, I'm an owner and I live at 8 Montmorency, right around the corner from Breeds Hill, the top of it. So what I'd like to show next would be just a couple different pictures. So one would be, this is what the site looked like in 2011. So, back in 2011, obviously there was a little bit of trash in the ground. In general, it was actually pretty well kept, right? This is an actual image from Google satellite showing that, the church was taking care of the property. Here's one from November 2020. So this shows that they actually took care of the property. Grass was cut, things look pretty good. I'd actually say it looks better than before. This is what it looks like today. So I'd like to point out the alcohol over the ground, all the trash in the side of it, all the actual weeds on the property. And then this shows you the curb appeal. So currently, to what the other person, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but what you mentioned, I think it does look atrocious. There's no doubt about that. So, except I kind of have a differing opinion on this. I think you guys have been terrible neighbors and not keeping your property up, right? Like, I think you should have been here. And if you really had an interest in making sure the neighborhood was better, you would have kept this up. I think this is right now being used for rampant drug use, alcohol. It's a huge eyesore to the neighborhood. You can see here that somebody took abandoned TV. So this has been dumped on the property for months. I think it's been here for about 6 months, if I remember correctly. I walk by here every single day. And, I think it's an eyesore. I'm a little concerned about how do you make sure the property is kept well. So when you mention you're going to landscape, is it going to look like the pictures before? Or are you just going to do a couple little things? And how do we make sure that actually happens? Because when I look at this, I mean, I don't know, sir, Jeffrey, do you think this is actually being a good neighbor? When you see this?
Well,
When you see the picture, does this show respect to the community?
Well, I think the fact that 200 residents of the area wrote letters of support of the project show the respect in which the fathers in the shrine have for people on the hill. I think the fact that in tough economic times for nonprofits and churches, for the fathers to choose to put the limited resources they have and help in terms of focus it towards helping people with substance use disorder, helping the poor and the needy. I think frankly that has been a priority of theirs over this landscaping this particular piece of property.
You would agree
So well, I'm answering your question. And so what this proposal will do is create additional revenue and additional obligations on behalf of our sign partner, which will make sure that the area is properly maintained. And then obviously, if neighbors are walking through an area for 6 months, every day seeing a broken TV that was unlawfully dropped there, one would think maybe a neighbor could pick up the phone and call the shrine and say, are you aware of this? And then maybe then that could have been picked up. So I think that, like all nonprofits, like government and businesses, you have to make choices what you do with your limited resources. And one of the things the shrine and the fathers are trying to do now is to create additional resources so they have better resources and better obligations to take care of this. So certainly we agree with you that having it overgrown is not the preferable, preferable landscape. We think that the pictures that you showed earlier are much better.
So are you going to landscape the whole entire thing is my question. Is the whole entire top going to be taken care of? Will it look like before? What is it going to look like at the end on top of the hill? Will that money be, how often are you going to take care of the top of the hill? How often are you going to mow it? How often are you going to make sure the trash is gone? When you say that you landscape it, what exactly does that mean?
Well, I mean, I'm the lawyer for the project. I'm not the landscape manager. What I can tell you is that as part of the obligation with the partner, that the hill will be properly landscaped. And as someone who brings their young children up there on occasion to have some quiet time and some prayer time, I much prefer that the place be properly maintained so that we can go up there and sit there and frankly look at the city and recognize the wonderful graces that we've been given. So that's I think if you're looking for every day at 6 a.m. someone's going to be there, I can't guarantee that. What I can guarantee you is that our partner will have contractual obligations to make sure that the hill is properly maintained, both so that there's maximum visibility for the sign and the important equipment that's at its base, but also so that the cross it continues to be an area as it has for decades where people can go and have some quiet time in a crazy and hairy world.
Yeah, I just like to say that I think you guys should have done a better job at maintaining it over the past couple of years. All right, I think it's a disgrace. That's all I'll say.
Appreciate it. We're looking for volunteers if you got time. Thank you.
Hey, look, you meet me outside and pick it up. I'll help you. Organize.
No, I mean that truly. I know.
Don't mow your yard. All right?
Yeah, I get you.
Set something up. I'll pick it up with you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate your feedback though, and the pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the pictures. I know people in the chat appreciated that. I know we said, Gail, I'm not sure if your hand was up for previously or if you have something else to say. So please do let us know. Otherwise, we're going to, she says, I request this proposal be continued until we learn more about the specifics. She stands that I stand by the forbidden use of digital billboard. Okay. Thank you so much, Gail, for your input. All right. And thank you, Jeff, for joining us this evening. And then we look forward to getting those photos of the renderings and we'll distribute that.
Could I just invite up the people that are here in support of the project to say their name for the record, or would that be helpful to you? Or
sure, we could do that quickly.
Just take a minute just so they can look in the camera. And
can we also identify if they live in the neighborhood versus live outside Orient?
Yeah, that would be helpful. So let's do that. And then we do have a MassDOT update that we'll be moving on to.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Just say the name
And where you live.
182 Orient Ave. I'm sorry, Maria Capogreco, 182 Orient Ave.
Father Antonio, 59 Ashley Street, East Boston. Carmela Bertino. I'm at 575 and 577 Bennington Street, East Boston.
Caroline La Rosa, 20th Orient Avenue, East Boston.
Francis Donato, 334 Mohegan Street in East Boston.
Rosa Amabile, 267 Harvard Street, East Boston.
Joan Northway, 100 Boats Lanes Way, Chelsea, Mass.
Paul Travellini, 16 Montmorency Avenue, East Boston, Mass.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, and now I see, I believe Michael from Mass Dot is with us for an update on safety and bicycle improvements. Michael, are you here?
Yeah, I'm
Are
right
you
here.
free to leave, Maria? I'm sorry. I just want to make
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. I'll submit those pictures to you. Thank you. And thank
Thank
you everyone
you.
for your feedback.
Great. Okay, Michael, we will turn it over to you in your presentation.
Great. Thanks, Maria. And thanks for having us tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I was actually sort of wishing we were finally going to be doing this in maybe a more hybrid way and actually kind of be able to come out and meet some of my neighbors from Orient Heights. I want to acknowledge I'm a resident at Jeffries Point. Been here for about 8 years. It's a really fascinating conversation to listen in on. And you know, look forward to hearing a similar level of feedback from the group on what we're proposing for Bennington Street. I want to just acknowledge I'm joined here tonight by Taylor Dennerline from the Tool Design Group. She is our traffic engineer and is leading the engineering and design side of the project. And I'm a program manager with MassDOT. So one of the roles I play at the department is to go and find where we have bicycle and pedestrian network need. I work a great deal on our regional trails network, and I'm also a lead for our intersection improvement and safety program. This project sort of touches on all of those hats that I wear at MassDOT, and we have a hopefully short presentation to present to you guys. But one thing I've learned in presenting to some other neighbors here in the neighborhood is that we tend to talk first and talk too much. And I was hoping to sort of poll the group, maybe either through chat or through a couple, some folks who wanted to share some thoughts, but on Bennington Street. And when someone mentions Bennington Street, sort of what your gut reaction is, and the things that you as neighbors feel is wrong, or the opportunities that we have to improve it. I'll just acknowledge before we do that, the stretch that we're going to be presenting on tonight is from Suffolk Downs to Beachmont. So from so-called Donnelly Square and Revere at Winthrop Ave, back into East Boston over the border, past the Belle Isle Marsh Reservation to Leverett Ave in front of the Suffolk Downs station. So that's the subject, the project area that we're here to discuss. But I wanted to just sort of get some initial sort of feedback from the group on how folks perceive Bennington Street and what they think, what the neighbors think about its needs.
If folks want to put things in the chat, I'm happy to read them out. Marguerite, I don't know if your hand is up from last discussion or if you have something to contribute about Bennington Street, but
it didn't feel like we had a shy group here tonight, so I thought I'd open with
protected bike lanes are much needed. There's a comment in the chat.
I think I saw a comment about it. Just calling it out as a strode. It's a term that we hear a lot in the transportation industry.
Anyone else? Mike, yes.
I think there were some other folks ahead of me, so I will absolutely defer and wait my turn.
Okay, other hands up. Marguerite, I don't know if she's still with us, but please speak up if you have something to say on this. And then otherwise, Sean had a comment.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Marguerite.
Yes, I'm sorry I left the room. Please repeat your question.
Oh, I noticed your hand was up, so we were just wondering if you had anything to say about the proposal for the bike lanes or anything about Bennington Street.
I mean, we're going to present on it. I just sort of wanted to get folks.
We're just looking for some feedback.
Where do they want, where does MassDOT want to put the bike lanes? Bennington? They want to add them?
Yeah, we're going to talk through the details. What I wanted to sort of hear is like, what are the neighbors' sort of first impressions when someone says Bennington Street to you? You know, what is your gut reaction about it?
Not that if there's going to be a lot of bike lanes, there's a problem parking for the residents as it is. I know there's some on the left side between on the corner of Bennington and Byron in front of the big white house there. There's some bike parking areas. You're not going to put bike parking areas, are you? That's going to really detract from being able to park or any deliveries that may be needed. I don't know. Bennington Street's a big street, left, right. You're going to put some parking for the bikes, or you're talking bike lanes?
We'll get into the details.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and just to read off some additional comments in the chat, Bennington Street, some people feel is not pedestrian or bicyclist friendly. Driving hazards of that stretch of Bennington Street include rough pavement on the Revere side of that road, solar glare as you approach the former site of the casket company. Bike lanes and solar glare are a dangerous combination. 4 lanes is too many car lanes, feels like a highway. So those are some things in the chat. Mike, I'd like to return to you. I know you had your hand up and a comment to say.
Sure. Thank you so much. A few things on Bennington Street. Number one, you cannot have an intelligent conversation about Bennington Street and its current use without considering that a lot of the traffic on Bennington Street during the rush hour, morning and evening, is there because of the deficient state of Route 1A.
Right.
So as an arterial street, it connects Beachmont at Winthrop Ave and why don't we say Day Square in the sort of arterial divided configuration that we're all familiar with. I'm a cycling advocate, but that is a dangerous street to bicycle on. And I want to be real clear. A lot of the traffic engineers that I've had the opportunity to speak with that are in either the employ of the city or MassDOT, lovely people, many of them a generation younger than me. They didn't grow up in East Boston. They might not even have grown up in New England. I will tell you, there is a unique psychographic, a unique mindset to the New England driver. And that mindset puts bicyclists at risk. So by building bicycle infrastructure without consideration of the way that people behave on the roads right now, today, you're going to get somebody killed. And I don't like saying that because I want people to be able to get around in this community or any community the way that they choose and to be safe. But a protected lane is really going to cause the need for a full reconfiguration of the street. I think that an alternative proposal that would use Saratoga Street and make it monodirectional with the opposing lane, a protected bike lane, is much, much more feasible than taking a street that carries, I haven't looked at a traffic study, so I don't know how many automobiles, but if you're trying to get between Orient Heights and the on-ramp to 1A down at Neptune Road, that can take as much as 35 minutes during a morning commute. So you can't speak about this particular pathway between Beachmont and Day Square without understanding the other transportation problems in the community. And we need to seek some alternatives. I have given a long look at the community planning documents that were published by the BPDA about 2 years ago. A lot of good ideas, a lot of ideas that ought to be consigned to the dustbin of history. The way that people get around in this neighborhood currently, in the mindset of the people that are behind the wheel, not just the passenger cars, but also, people in pickup trucks, workers, union guys that are trying to get to a job site. It's dangerous. And you know what? It's dangerous in Alston. It's dangerous in Dorchester. It's dangerous all over the city. And it has everything to do with the way that people think and behave behind the wheel of a vehicle. And paint stripes in the street is not going to change that. Indeed, it might inflame people to behave in really reprobate ways on the road. So these are the types of considerations that I am asking you to thoughtfully consider as you make a plan.
All right. Well, I think that's a really great. Well, Mike, I hope, and everyone else that commented here, this is really great feedback, and I think that give us our chance to present what we.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what you guys came up with, but that's honestly, those are the concerns, and those are based on observations.
And I'm pleased to
in
hear
Greater
this.
Boston.
I'm pleased to hear it because these are the same concerns I have, both as a resident of East Boston and a user, and as a safety professional at the Department of Transportation. So, Taylor, if you could pull up our presentation, we'll get into the details. So I think a lot of what we heard, I think you guys will see is addressed in our presentation. And while what we are trying to accomplish here does not get as far as probably everyone would like, this is what we're trying to do is take the first step in realizing a modernized and safer Bennington Street that accommodates a lot of the uses that the neighborhood is demanding and the land use is demanding, and is sort of reflective of what that next generation of transportation investment in East Boston is going to require. So next slide, Taylor. I want to talk through just at a very high level the goals for our project, existing conditions, which I think everyone in this room is going to be quite familiar with. And we're going to walk through our draft plans and what we're proposing, and then hopefully leave some time for feedback and discussion. I'll acknowledge what we're here to chat about is, and present to this group is really that is what we in our industry refer to as a quick build. So it sort of takes the goals of a larger planning study like the BPDA's Plan East Boston and its vision for Bennington Street. It starts to chunk away at what we believe is the lowest hanging fruit in that vision, and one that can sort of pilot the condition from a traffic and operations perspective, pilot the condition that's proposed in that plan and others, and start to demonstrate its longer term viability and build confidence as larger investments in the transportation network are considered. So we aren't doing this alone. Mass DOT, as one of the chat messages acknowledged, Bennington Street is a state highway in Revere, but is owned by the city of Boston, approaching well, the entire length in Boston, but in our project area from Leverett Ave at Suffolk Downs to the line at the Marsh Inlet. We've also we're partnered with both the city of Boston and Revere, and DCR is a strong partner as the owner of the reservation, and the Suffolk Downs redevelopment team at HYM. That we've met with them many times and have sort of developed not only the concept, but even just the will to advance something in this way, all together and with consensus amongst all of those partners. So our goals here are to improve multimodal connections. When I say multimodal, I mean people walking, biking, and taking transit, in this case, the Blue Line, taking that first step towards implementing local and regional plans, both for Bennington Street and for our larger off-road shared use path bicycle network that would stretch from East Boston to Lynn and all the way back to Somerville. And this is a key gap in that. Just acknowledge the comment in the chat when we say multimodal. Of course, that also includes cars, but it's about balancing automotive demand against all the other users of the roadway. So forgive me for not clarifying that. Because really the third goal is to improve the experience for everybody, but also make this corridor safer for people traveling in cars and drive speeds down and the potential for high severity crashes. Next slide. One of these, to drive this point home, this map is not terribly legible if you're not as familiar as we are in the team, but looking up in the top left corner of this map, you see the terminus of the East Boston Greenway at Constitution, the Mary Ellen Welch Greenway at Constitution Beach, sort of hitting a wall at the driveway of the beach, and not really having a safe connection to get both to the Orient Heights train station under the Saratoga Street underpass, which is a project that's been considered and envisioned in many ways, but also gaps going up Bennington Street from Orient Heights Square, and making connections to the Suffolk Downs shared use path network that'll be on their site, also the Wally Street connection that they've committed to. So what we're looking at is that stretch of Bennington Street, not all the way back to Day Square, or certainly not back to Central Square, but this stretch that has lower demand for parking, has lower demand for vehicles, and is quite the most overbuilt in its length. So again, as I noted, the project split between Revere and Boston, and so that line that you see sort of drawn down the middle there is about where the city line is, and on one side city owned and the other is Mass DOT. We are also working on a project with the city of Revere to connect Revere Beach Boulevard and the boardwalk at Revere Beach. We call that the Beachmont Connector, which would connect into improvements by HYM at Donnelly Square and ultimately connect in with this leg of improvements that we're proposing here tonight. So what we're trying to do here, as I said, is bring these plans to life. The previous planning efforts around Plan East Boston, real robust multi-year planning effort by BPDA. Some of the work that CZM has begun with their designated port area boundary review, the East Boston Resilient Waterfront Project that the Environment Department at City of Boston has been working on, Climate Ready, East Boston Phase 2, looking at various considerations for Bennington Street and the berms and the living levees and all the sorts of things that the stakeholders involved in that process are envisioning. And this is really a big step towards downsizing Bennington Street and reimagining all the space that is dedicated for vehicle travel to be sort of reimagined for that next generation of investment. So again, I'm going to tell you guys something that everybody here knows. This stretch of Bennington is 4 lanes, undivided, has sort of some areas that has painted shoulders for parking. There's sidewalks, albeit very deficient, on both sides of the roadway with those large, wide grass buffers. And the speed limit varies between 20 and 30 miles an hour. So I'm going to hand it over to Taylor to kind of talk through some of the more the data we've collected, how we've analyzed it, and what we're proposing in terms of the envisioned redesign of this stretch of Bennington.
Great, thank you, Michael. I will say I didn't grow up in Massachusetts, but I grew up in Rhode Island, and I believe we have the distinction of having even worse drivers than Massachusetts, which is something. So we did collect traffic data for this project, to mostly speed data. So we collected it in 2 different locations. So one was just south of Everard Street and one was just north of Lover Ave. As Michael said, the speed limit is generally 30 miles per hour. However, with there was a school zone to the north, so at times it is 20 miles per hour. Average speeds were anywhere from 34 to 39 miles per hour. So what this means in general is that, 3 out of every 4 drivers on Bennington Street in this location were traveling above the speed limit and generally going much higher. And I think this kind of lines up with the police officer who was on earlier, who said they were clocking some people going 70 miles an hour. So this definitely shows similar data. The average daily traffic was just under 11,000 vehicles per day. So for the existing vehicle operations, generally this is, when you're in a vehicle, how long are you waiting at the light? The delay for these intersections are generally 5 seconds or less. So, we call this negligible delay. For the most part, you are able to head down Bennington Street at generally whatever speed you would like, at least at this segment. So this is just a cross-section view of what Michael just stated. There's 2 lanes in each direction, striped either parking or a shoulder, depending on the segment, with the sidewalk and grass buffers that vary in width. So Michael had mentioned the Plan East Boston report and concepts that came out. So for Plan East Boston, they envisioned Bennington Street in this location to have 1 vehicle lane in each direction, one-way bicycle, protected bike lanes, 1 on each side of the street to be protected in some fashion, some intersection improvements, and maintaining parking on both sides. So what we're proposing is a little different from the concept that was provided in Plan East Boston, mostly because we are matching the design plans for Donnelly Square. So they have a shared use path coming through Donnelly Square that currently ends right around Crescent Ave. So that's just north of our study area. So we will be, we propose to maintain kind of this, the 2-way separated bike lane, or, the path down through our study area as well. And then transitioning at Lever Avenue back to, the existing conditions. This buffer area in the middle, it can be used as kind of an auxiliary lane. Sometimes it's a buffer, sometimes it's a turn lane. It can be a 2-way turn lane, kind of depending on the needs of the road at that location. So kind of going into plan view for the intersections. So this is Everard Street. So coming in, I believe, sorry, there's no north arrow, but north is kind of pointing to the right of the page. So we are maintaining 2 vehicle lanes through the intersection and be merging afterwards down to 1 vehicle lane in each direction. Parking is generally on one side through our project area. However, north of Everard Street, both sides of parking are maintained. At the Belle Isle Marsh driveway, we do propose to use that the kind of middle auxiliary lane as a dedicated turn lane into the marsh. We had met with Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh, and they expressed interest for having the parking located on the marsh side to facilitate people visiting the marsh and access. So we did make that design change.
Right, so just to point that out a little bit more clearly, please, Denolin, I'm Taylor. What you're seeing here in this, the cross section is that travel lane headed eastbound at the top of the page. I'm sorry, westbound at the top of the page towards Orion Heights. The left turn lane turning into the Belle Isle Marsh driveway. The eastbound travel lane going towards Revere, and then that the buffered area where we include the parking and the buffer for the bike lane, the bidirectional bike lane with some kind of vertical feature. So this is gore and paint, but also with a lot of the sort of interventions we see around the city deploying around Boston with quick curb and flex posts. We believe that with the cross-section sort of squeezed back down, this is part of what's going to drive those vehicle speeds down and sort of enforce compliance by design into staying much more closely compliant with the speed limits. There's a couple conflict zones. You see those green stripes at the driveway. That's denoting that cyclists moving across the driveway could encounter vehicles turning in there. And these are the sorts of standard bike design features that are part of the toolkit in everyday bike accommodation designs in the industry now. So this is quite a bit different than what you can sort of see in the aerial, where those 4 lanes are all reappropriated, and essentially all the travel in this area is where vehicles are moving inbound to Boston now.
And then moving to Lever Ave. So this is kind of the southern end of our study area. We are opening the southbound travel back up to 2 lanes through the intersection as well, and transitioning southbound bike riders back to the southern side of the street, and transitioning back to kind of the existing conditions south of our study area as of right now. The city of Boston did express interest in upgrading the curb ramps at this location as well. That's why there are these odd kind of black donuts. It's just donating the, it's just signifying the upgrades for the ramps. And I know we kind of went quickly through kind of just portions of the plan set, so I did want to show where we are proposing to maintain parking. So it is saying maintaining parking on both sides of the street, kind of at the northern and southern end of our study area, and then it is switched to the Belle Isle Marsh side, just to maintain access to the marsh. So this is the proposed vehicle operations. So as I said, it's kind of how long it's going to take to move through these intersections. So the delay generally went from around 5 seconds to approximately 15 seconds. So this is both in the AM and PM peak. So it went from level of service A to B. In urban environments, this is pretty unheard of for the level of service to be this high. MassDOT, City of Boston generally say anything A, B, C, or D is considered adequate. So even with the proposed changes, the vehicle operations are still proposed to be generally smooth sailing. And I didn't know at the beginning, but these all the vehicle counts that we performed were performed this year. So they are recent counts, and we kind of back checked with pandemic and pre-pandemic counts just to make sure that we were using the correct baseline. Michael, did you want to?
Yeah. I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, we're not as well rehearsed as we'd like. We are still on a tour of community engagement, and this coming before this group was a big box on our list. So months ago, we started putting out very informally an informational what we call story map, and it's really just a website, and trying to detail what we're proposing to do. This meeting here, and of course, thank you for having us at this meeting here, is part of our direct outreach program where we're trying to really hear from neighbors and abutters and local stakeholders that have the most to gain or lose from our proposal. And ultimately, we want to continue to assess after we've implemented this project how it's working And part of the reason that we're proposing this with paint and plastic is that it's sort of part of our evolving transportation investment practice. We invest a little bit and see how it works because we're making pretty substantial changes to overall vehicle capacity. And then start to make, and if it works, great, we keep it until we have a more permanent investment. In whether that's a project that fully realizes the vision in the Plan East Boston, or starts to make improvements in the ecology of the Belle Isle Marsh and the resiliency and flood resiliency of those abutting neighborhoods and the Blue Line, or whatever it may be, being able to limit the roadway from a 60-foot wide swath of pavement to something where it's really only demanding 24 feet to accommodate those travel lanes in each direction. Just, straight automotive space. We can build a lot more flexibility and have the confidence of the community that those more permanent changes can work. So it's part of the new toolkit of transportation investment in trying things out and piloting an approach before trying to convince everybody that tens of millions of dollars should be invested. We can invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in this type of corridor. One other thing that's sort of lost in the presentation is some of the more technical scope items around what happens where. So what you saw on the map was on the plans was a lot of pavement markings and restriping and reallocation of road space. We also acknowledge that the stretch of pavement in Revere is in pretty tough shape, and in order for us to get those new pavement markings to adhere to the pavement surface, we are planning to resurface that stretch of road leading up to Everard Street to make that intervention more successful. But we're pretty excited about this as an opportunity to test things out. Earlier I mentioned this area has a lower demand, quote unquote. I don't mean that to be a formal term for parking, but this is an area where we don't have nearly as much residential land use, only a little bit closer towards Leverett Ave and down on the other end in Revere, and a large stretch of marsh in the middle. And we can start to see how an intervention like this could benefit this stretch of Bennington Street and perhaps others down the line. And I'll just acknowledge that's not within Mass DOT's purview. We're partnered with the city of Boston because this is a stretch that we own and can't really do anything about without crossing jurisdiction. And think that this really leaves us a great opportunity to leverage all kinds of different benefits for the transportation network and the ecology of the Belle Isle Marsh and all kinds of, and the resiliency of the neighborhoods all at once in one small step. So I'll stop there. I appreciate the opportunity to give such a long presentation to the group, and I know there's a lot of questions in the chat. So Maria, will
Thank you. And I'd just like to start with Patricia, who I think was trying to raise her hand. I think she was the first to have a question. So Patricia, if you want to take yourself off mute, we can take your question.
Hello?
Hi. Yep, we can hear you, Patricia.
Okay. No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to raise my hand the last one. I couldn't find it.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. And then I see in the chat, John was next. Does this plan take into consideration the school traffic that exists at the start and finish? Some questions about the car queue being long, parents waiting for school to get out.
That's at the Beachmont School, just for clarification.
It says parents wait on Bennington Street. John, if you're with us, do you want to clarify on the school and the section you're referring to? I think that's probably correct, but.
Taylor, have we observed that in any of our field observations or traffic data collection? Can you speak to that?
We did. We actually went out and performed a signal warrant for Everard Street. So the signal is basically there because of the kids crossing. It's used as a pedestrian signal. So we are going to keep the signal there just so kids can cross and safely cross Bennington Street. So we were there at morning pickup. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, anything crazy, but we can go back and double check and chat with school officials. The reason parking generally has to be on the western side is the signal heads. So the vehicle lanes need to kind of remain where they are, so they line up with the signal. But we can definitely look at how much more, how far we can stretch that and where we need to have parking maintained for school pickup drop off.
Yeah, and I apologize to interrupt again, but I realized I never gave a sense of timeline, because it's a bit of a moving target for us. We had hoped to get this implemented in this construction season, so late fall, based on a number of just how everything seems to work nowadays and supply chain issues and contractor availability. That's not looking possible. So we're shooting for this to be in one of our first work orders in our various bicycle and pedestrian improvements, various locations contract at DOT. So that we would be starting to implement. I don't want to call them shovels in the ground, but paint brushes on the street, if you will, in early spring, mid-spring.
Thank you. I'm going to read one more question in the chat, and then we'll go Sean, Mike, and Jane all have questions. So question in the chat, will there be a crosswalk at the Belle Isle Marsh entrance?
Yeah, so this is something we really aspire to include in this phase of the project. And unfortunately, when we try to do something like that, it's sort of a road to hell paved with a good intentions kind of effect. To introduce a crosswalk would kick us into a whole lot of different accessibility requirements and upgrades, which, unfortunately, as much as we'd like to do that now, it's not within the scope of this phase of the project, but certainly something that we can continue to target. It's sort of like if we tried to do that now, we would hold up these improvements for another, I'll be honest, another year past what we're planning now. And I think that there are intentional consequences with, we refer to this as a road diet approach. It's going to slow speeds, and it's going to make crossing at that location, albeit not protected and legal with a crosswalk, a lot easier to do for people who are already doing it. And at either end, certainly at Leverett Ave, it's going to be a lot more comfortable to cross. And we're going to make it so that light is a little more responsive to people coming out of the Suffolk Down station. But that's sort of it's unfortunately a kicking of the can, that and additional sidewalk improvements along the corridor. It's something we really aspire to include here, and we talked through extensively with the city of Boston, and we really felt like we would sacrifice these improvements in the more immediate term for something that we all recognize is absolutely necessary.
Thank you. And just want to note the time here. We're close to 7:45. I think we'll take the questions from Sean, Mike, and Jane, but we do have one more presenter on the schedule. I'm hoping we can go to around 8 o'clock tonight, if that's okay with folks. So Sean, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Sure. Thanks for presenting it. This looks great. I am concerned about the parking. What was the number of parking spots we're going to lose? I mean, and the only reason I say parking is, one, it's tough, like everybody's mentioned, and two, I mean, we're going to have 10,000 units in Suffolk Downs coming in soon, and I think a lot of those people aren't going to want to pay to park in Suffolk Downs, similar to like Assembly Row, right? Like buy a parking pass, and they're going to park in the local neighborhoods, and that's going to include Orient Heights, throughout the hill, as well as Bennington Street, going all the way down towards Day Square. Maybe not that far, but parking is going to be wherever they can get for free. It's a lot of units coming in there. So how many parking spots exactly are we losing?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to say because none of the spots are I mean, it's so incredibly informal along Bennington Street, and frankly, so infrequently used through that long.
Yeah, the
through
only thing
the
I
long stretch.
measure it, right? Like measure it out, average car size. Like it would be nice to get an estimate, I think, just so that, you know, the neighborhood could just understand like what is the potential of losing for parking. I'm happy to see bike lanes. I'm really worried about 10,000 units going behind our you know, our neighborhood here.
Taylor, I assume we hadn't, maybe I'm falsely assuming we hadn't quantified that number, but
Correct. We haven't, but we absolutely can at least give some sort of estimate. Parking is restricted in a lot of the segments anyway. But we can absolutely make those calculations and send it out to the group.
good. Thank you, Taylor. Yeah, I mean, my guess is that it's more on the order of like 12 to 20 and not 100. And that was something that when we met with the Friends of the Belle Isle Marsh, that kind of frankly surprised me. I ride through this area and enjoy the Belle Isle quite a bit, and rarely see anybody parked on that side of Bennington Street. And we heard like, well, that's because you don't get out of bed in time and come to the marsh sparrow swallow taggings, and you know the street is lined with vehicles. And so that was a major change we made. We had eliminated parking on that side. And we tried to be responsive to some of those needs and make sure that we were leaving that supply available.
Thank you. All right, and Mike, you had a question. Oh, you're on mute, Mike. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Oh, my bad.
There we go.
So real quick, Michael, in regard to the infrastructure that you'll be deploying here, and I understand a lot of it is going to be paint, but there will be plastic dividers, or I didn't see that on the plan. What impact will the infrastructure that you deploy have on snow removal activities? And what impact will snow removal activities have on the infrastructure that you deploy?
That's a great question, Mike. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have an answer. This is part of the negotiation that occurs at DOT internally as we start our peoples at our district level who oversee snow removal on our stretch of the roadway. We start talking about what happens. And a lot of DOT's gut knee-jerk reaction is, well, we have to remove the flex posts and quick curb during the winter. City of Boston, on the other hand, feels very differently about it, and they leave a lot of this infrastructure in the
correct,
more
and
specialized.
Michael, I want you to understand, I'm asking this question because I want you to succeed, not
Thanks,
because I'm assuming that you're going to fail.
I read that,
but I grew
read
up
it that way.
in this state, and I know how stuff gets done here, and maybe it will change someday. I might even live long enough to see it.
Same here. So it's a great question, Mike, and it's one that we've been asking. Taylor and I have been asking ourselves, and it's an ongoing negotiation. So I wish I had a better answer, and I wish I could commit to a better outcome yet.
At least you know that it's a question that needs to be asked, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And Taylor, by the way, I spent a significant part of my adult life in Rhode Island, and I am 100% on board with your assessment of the average motorist there.
Yeah, they're not good. I will say that one of the benefits of having the two-way bike lane as opposed to kind of the one-way pairs, they're typically wide enough that you can send down just a normal plow truck. Just down the bikeway as opposed to having kind of specialized equipment. So that's definitely kind of one of the benefits that everyone saw is having the two-way as opposed to the separate ones. Yeah,
and it's my hope that the city of Boston sort of steps up to the plate here and says, we'll send a plow truck down the whole length. And, you know, that's my hope. I'm certainly not going to put them on the hook for it, but it's a lot easier than asking a DOT, you know, giant industrial sized plow that's doing Route 16 come down the ramp and try and do this. It's just not. We don't have the equipment deployed in this area to make that work. So again, it's an ongoing negotiation, and we're hoping for a real positive outcome too, Mike.
Thank you. And Michael and/or Taylor, could someone send me the presentation either this evening or tomorrow? That would be wonderful.
Yep, Taylor absolutely will get that to you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
And thank you for your presentation, and thank you everyone for the thoughtful questions. All right, and last week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Last on the agenda, we have Mr. Anthony Amore, who's here to talk to us about the auditor's office. He is a candidate. up for election. So Anthony, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself and provide some information on the importance of the auditor's office.
Thank you, Maria. Again, my name is Anthony Amore. I'm grateful that you stuck around to and you're still here so you can hear me talk about the auditor's office. I want to mention before I begin that I live in Winchester, Massachusetts, but for up until July and for most of the time I've lived in Massachusetts, 32 years, I lived in East Boston. I lived over on Byron Street, up on the hill on Byron. So I know the area very well. So the meeting was interesting to me. You know, when you're running for state auditor, one of the things that you do most, before you even get to introduce yourself and say why you're running, is have to explain to people what the state auditor is. So just I like how this was sort of titled Auditor 101. Really quickly, what the auditor does, it's a statewide position. It's one of 6 constitutional offices. And the auditor is responsible for looking at every state agency, there's 209 of them, and evaluating each state agency's performance once every 3 years. So it's a big job. The agency has more than 200 people working for it. And it's such a big job that our current state auditor, whose name is Suzanne Bump, isn't able to get to 100% of the agencies the way she's required. So I am looking to run for this office, win this office, she's retiring, and change that and make sure that all of the state agencies are being audited every 3 years. The auditor has wide latitude, so he could look at, he or she could look at the state police and say, you know, we're going to do an audit about if we have a sufficient number of staff, or we're going to do an audit of overtime, or we're going to look into, hey, how often do state troopers discharge their firearms, that sort of thing. And that information gets passed on to you. So the state auditor is the chief accountability officer for the state. And it's really important that you know that my view of that does not mean that state agencies would be answerable to me or accountable to me should I win, but that they'd be accountable to you. And my role would be finding waste, fraud, and abuse. And then part 2, telling you about it. You should know what's going on in your state government. You should know where your tax dollars are going. And you should have somebody who's a watchdog to make sure that those tax dollars are being spent efficiently, fairly, and in accordance with the law. And that's what I intend to do. Now, why I'm running is because I think that the auditor's office is a really important office. I think that after the governor, there's no more important office. What could be more important than in government than someone who's the eyes and ears and the honest broker for the taxpayer? So I want you to know that I'm the only statewide political candidate who's been endorsed by Charlie Baker this year. So I have the governor's endorsement. When I first decided to run for this office, he told me that if he hadn't run for governor, he would have run for auditor because he understands just how important it is. Just a quick word about my background. For the reason I lived in East Boston is because when I moved to Massachusetts in 1994, I worked at Logan Airport. I was an immigration officer. Then I was a federal agent working in aviation security. In fact, I was living in East Boston on December 22nd, 2001, when my boss called me and said, hey, you need to run over to the airport. Patriots were just coming on. He said, you need to run over. Someone tried to light their shoe on fire on an aircraft. So in the time it took me to get from Byron Street to Harborside Drive, I was on phone with NORAD because it was Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, and I was the special agent who was in charge of that emergency response, mainly because I lived so close to the airport. After I was a federal agent, what happened, as you all know, is 9/11 struck, and 9/11 shined a spotlight on Logan Airport because that's where the 2 aircraft that struck the Twin Towers departed from. And I was asked to help lead the effort to rebuild security at Logan. So I was Assistant Federal Security Director with the brand new Transportation Security Administration. I was one of Homeland Security's first employees in Massachusetts. And as you might remember, we federalized aviation security. And I almost with the flick of a switch had 1,200 federal employees working for me at Logan. And then I took over the compliance and enforcement branch, which again is auditing. And I tell you this background because it's important for you to know that for about 3 decades, I've been doing the work that the auditor does. I've been doing investigations and audits and assessments. I've done them in the public sector, as I just mentioned to you. And then in 2005, I went over to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, where I'm the chief investigator there and the director of security. And I, again, on the side, I have a side business as well, and I do audits and big investigations and inspections. And I just know how to do this. I've run large organizations ranging from 1,200 people to 60 in the private sector and outside of it. And I've done the work that an auditor does. And the reason that's so important is because this is a vital job, and you shouldn't have someone who goes in and has to learn the job on day one. I can do the job on day one. The last thing I think I want you to know about me is many of you have heard that we're all going to be getting a tax rebate soon. We're going to start going up in November because Section 62F kicked in based on this major surplus of $2.94 billion that the state currently holds. Well, back on August 4th, when we learned that this was kicking in, was my campaign that pushed State Auditor Suzanne Bump to certify that amount early so that you can get your money back early. It was my campaign that set up a petition and brought on a top flight attorney, Michael Sullivan, the former U.S. attorney, to file suit in Supreme Judicial Court if you don't get your money back. So I'm already working really hard to get your tax dollars back. This is what you can expect of me if I'm elected, and I would love your support. I see Dennis's point. Would rather we fix the T than get a few dollars back. Dennis, I understand your point exactly. And to that, I would say this surplus is money that's due back to the taxpayers in accordance with law. So Section 62F was a voter referendum back in 1986 that requires this money come back. But rest assured, this isn't the entire surplus the state has at this moment. So on top of what is already allocated for the T, on top of what they just finished for the last 30 days with the Orange Line, you also have a surplus of a few $1 billion that the state legislature can use for things like rehabilitating the T. So I feel your pain. I understand exactly what you mean, but there's a lot of money that needs to go back to the taxpayer. So I really appreciate your time. I want you to know that I'm eminently qualified for this job, and that the person I'm running against, who's a fine person and who was a state senator and state representative for 13 years, has had an honorable career, but has just never done this sort of work and has never led any organization of any sort. So this person would be learning on the job rather than digging in and getting the work done for the taxpayer. I know you're short on time. If anybody has any quick questions before you have to go, I'd be happy to answer them, but thank you so much for giving me your ear this evening.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Any questions? Anthony's campaign site's posted in the chat for folks that are interested as well.
Yep. I appreciate your support. It's almost 8 o'clock, so I can understand that nobody has any energy for questions, and the auditor's office is not a big flashing neon sign like the governor's office is, but it's important. It's important, and I'll leave you with this. You might not know much about the office right now, but if I'm elected, I guarantee you, you will know a lot about the office when I'm finished after my first term. Thank you, John. We will. Thank you, Sean. And I very, very much appreciate you. And I'm so glad people in my old neighborhood are so vigilant that 30 some odd people turn on for a neighborhood meeting. It is just beautiful to see. God bless you guys. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Okay. And we are going to just wrap up very quickly with some housekeeping items. Thanks everyone for staying on. I know this is a lengthy meeting this evening. First, I just want to say thank you for bearing with Jessica and I as we take over the neighborhood council. I know there'll be some bumps along the way. We're still figuring things out, but I appreciate everyone's patience and hanging in there with us. Most of our things will be posted on Facebook. So just be sure to keep an eye out on Facebook. We've finally figured out MailChimp, so we'll be sending updates, meeting minutes, all the things there as well. There have been a lot of questions about in-person meetings. We are investigating where those can be held and what that will look like in the future. Likely won't be in person for October, just since we're still figuring that all out, but we are actively looking into that. So just wanted to provide an update there. As always, if there's anything anyone wants to present or share, or someone they want to invite to speak, please reach out to us. We're always looking for items to be on the agenda. And we just did want to note that, we didn't have the design review committee meeting in September. And the idea is that I know the design committee meeting was something that had been broken up and set aside for a separate meeting. We, Jessica and I, unless we have support of someone who would assist us in helping run another meeting, we're going to bring the design agendas back into the regular monthly meeting. So that's still up for conversation, but that is the direction we're thinking of heading at this point. Of course, we always are looking for more leadership representation and board members. So if someone wants to assist us with that and set up a new process, we're definitely open to discussion there. Just see some things on the chat. Someone wants to know the status of St. Lazarus Hall. I don't know if you used to meet there, but we can look into that for sure. Okay, great. All right. So I think, Jessica, please chime in if there's anything else I missed. I think those are all of the housekeeping items. Again, we'll send out the meeting minutes. The recording this week, unfortunately, will miss the police update. We were a little late to clicking the button. So those are one of the bumps in the road that we'll be figuring out. But other than that, I'll stay on for a minute in case anyone has questions or wants to put something in the chat. But thank you and have a good evening. Someone said, any discussions about having the meetings at Don Orion's Hall? I will write down both St. Lazarus and Don Orion's Hall. Thank you for the suggestions. Also, if anyone knows anyone at the East Boston Times, that might be really helpful. We're trying to get the agendas posted there. It seems like people have had more than just this group has had a difficult time contacting the East Boston Times.
What's the Revere Journal?
Yeah, the Revere Journal, I think they're part of the same publication, but we need to look into that. Mike, yes, we can connect offline about the design review committee. Definitely. Do you have the general inbox email and we can touch base that way? Yes, perfect. Okay, we will touch base. Yeah, given the length of this meeting, I agree that they may need to remain separate. We're just having some capacity issues for who can manage the meetings. So we'll have to figure that out, but definitely open to discussions there. Okay, excellent. Yeah, we'll find a time to chat. We'll be in touch.
Glad to have you on board.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so Mike will be in touch with you and everyone else. Thank you for joining and we will send out an email shortly. Thank you.